Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
Hello and welcome to the show. And for regular listeners, I'm sorry to miss you last week. Forgive the space in the broadcast schedule. I'm back on the case. And over the next 2 weeks, I want to be doing something a little bit different for you on the podcast. This was inspired by one of the friends of the podcast, multi-New York Times bestselling author, the wonderful Kendra Adachi from episode 27. I couldn't believe it was that long ago, episode 27. And she recently launched a new book. It's called The Plan. It's a great book, by the way. And she did a series of pep talks for her podcast to accompany the launch of the book. And I really liked her mini pep talk episode concept, so I was inspired to bring you something similar. Effectively, these are some of the pep talks and some of the conversations I find myself very often having with students, parents or teachers, and I think are some of the most kind of core things to my philosophy that really, can really make an important foundation to your mindset and your approach to learning and all the other things we talk about on the show. I'm going to be doing 2 episodes per week in a slight shake-up to the normal format. I'll be doing a Sunday episode and then followed up with a Monday episode. So 4 episodes in total, 2 this week, 2 next week. And each is a sort of slightly shorter episode than normal, but they form a nice pair. So each week there's a pair of episodes. And I've chosen the topics for that pair of pep talks to offer slightly contrasting perspectives, because I know there's a lot of variation in the starting point of my listeners, and there's all sorts of different things and all sorts of different messages that you might need to hear to make progress depending on where you're at. And so between the pairs each week, there should be at least one episode out of the 2 that resonates with you. So for example, next week, one of my episodes is about finding your purpose and finding that drive, but I'm following that up with an episode on keeping things in perspective. So not letting the pressure spiral out of control. So nice kind of balance and contrast there between those 2 episodes, depending on whether you need to find your purpose and find your drive, or help rein it in and keep things in perspective. So we all kind of sometimes end up at one end of that spectrum or the other. So I think there's something there for everybody. So depending on where you're at the moment, either one or the other of those pep talks should be a good thing to help you make some progress. So this week, tomorrow I'll be discussing how some of you listening may well want to kind of be letting go of the concept of being fully prepared for an exam, especially if it's an advanced one, because you may never master every last detail of an immense course, but that's okay. You just need to do what you can in the time available to us. And this is a really important message. It's a conversation I have over and over again, particularly with more advanced students I'm working with. So tune in tomorrow for more on that. But for today, I want to discuss something that's been coming up a lot in my work, particularly in recent years, compared to when I started the podcast, it was 5 years ago. And that's the fact that I want to encourage you to never stop striving for growth in your study strategy and exam prep process. I've seen firsthand over the past decade or so how awareness of the fundamentals I teach, the underlying awareness has bloomed in education systems, especially here in my native UK. The majority of teachers I now talk to know all about retrieval practice and spaced learning in a way that simply wasn't true 10 years ago. And so this knowledge is also being passed through to students. Sometimes students now know the theoretical foundations well, or sometimes they just know the implications and the strategies we should use or not use as a result. And this is great. I mean, I'm super excited to see this development. I've long been passionate about the power of learning to learn effectively, so it's genuinely really exciting for me to see the word spreading so much. However, as awareness and knowledge spreads, it brings new challenges. To illustrate these, let me tell you about 2 students, wonderful individuals, really bright, really articulate, very impressive young people, both of them, who I've met in the past couple of days. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about some fragments of the conversations we had, because I think together these make for some really interesting lessons for us all. So the first student I wanted to talk to you about, initially, one of the things I sometimes do with a new student when I'm talking to them is to ask them to rate their their kind of study strategy in 10 different areas, things like how motivated you feel, how easily it is for you to concentrate and avoid distractions, through to your understanding of how to learn well. And on the latter part of the spectrum, he gave himself a rating of 7 out of 10. So in terms of how well he thought he knew how to learn well, it was all right, fairly good. Still a little bit of room for improvement. Okay, I thought. So later on in the conversation, we started to get into the theory of how to learn well. And I explained, as I often do, that if we only understand 2 things about how to learn well, the most important foundation to 2 things would always be the power of retrieval practice and the power of spaced learning. Now, those aren't the only things to understand about how to learn well, but if we know those and can apply them really, really well, they will take us a very, very long way. So 80-20 principle, those are the sort of 20% of the principles you want to know to get yourself 80% of the results. And I asked if he was familiar with these terms, as I often do, and if so, what do we mean by them? At which point he quickly cycled back to the rating exercise we'd done earlier and downgraded his 7 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10. Now, I don't mean to suggest I take any satisfaction at all from undermining people's confidence in their learning skills, but what concerns me is that if I hadn't had the chance to have that conversation with this individual, they might have gone around thinking they'd got quite a lot of knowledge about how to learn well, whereas actually when we kind of dig into it, there's an awful lot more than he was expecting that he had the opportunity to learn and get better at by learning that. So it's great to learn about how to learn effectively, but I think one thing to watch out for are the false summits you will encounter along the way. There may be multiple points along the journey where we kind of think we got it cracked, we know what we're doing now, only to realise that while we might be doing fine, we might be doing a lot better than we were doing, and there's almost always another level that we can get to. And the benefits of getting to that next level are that we can become even more successful and or even more time efficient in our learning. The other student I wanted to talk to you about, I was asking them about their current learning strategy. It's one of the routine questions I ask when I was meeting a new student. How are you approaching your learning today? And they described a very robust sounding process. And as I was reflecting on this afterwards, I thought that a younger and less experienced version of me from years back when I was first starting out in this, I might have sat back at that point and thought, oh, blimey, well, they know what they're doing. There's nothing for me to add here. She sounds like she's got this sorted. However, as we dug deeper, we found that the process she'd outlined was more of an aspiration. And in practice, it was difficult to get past the first 1 or 2 stages in the time she had available. So in this case, she did know what she was doing. She did have a good theoretical basis, and she knew what was going to be effective. The challenge for her was not the knowledge. The challenge was actually executing her understanding and putting those principles into action. So here we have 2 students. One, an illustration of kind of how we can know something about a field and kind of mistake that perhaps for knowing more about that field than is the case. And the other is an example of how we can know some stuff, and it might be the right stuff to know, but we might still struggle to put it into action. Now, none of this is meant to shame anyone. Look, no one is born an expert at learning well, just as no one is born an expert pilot or surgeon or investment manager. This isn't to criticise or critique or shame anyone in any way whatsoever. Rather, what I want to emphasise is that, like becoming a pilot or a surgeon or an investment manager, learning to learn well is a skill, and it's a skill we can develop over time. The theoretical foundations of everything I talk about on the podcast can generally be found in good psychology textbooks now. But the bit that gets me really interested is how we can actually put those ideas into action, how we can get those practical steps in place that can make a technique click and help you soar with it. Steve Jobs once gave a commencement address at Stanford University in which he made the point that if you feel satisfied with the status quo, then you won't strive for greatness. Stay hungry was part of his message. So having confidence in your skills and abilities today, while combining that with a hunger to strive for growth, is a powerful and I think quite rare mindset for life success. We're certainly not beating ourselves up that we're inadequate and poor and awful today, but we also are open to learning and growing and developing further. Every year, I learn more about all kinds of skills. Some skills related to the work I do, some skills related to my personal life outside of work. Skills like writing well, public speaking, designing slides and reports, how to be a good coach, how to relate to my friends and family, how to manage my personal finances. Some of these skills I have, at various points in my adult life, prided myself on being rather good at. And I've sometimes, off the back of putting some significant time and effort into honing and nurturing a given skill through additional learning, reading, classes, coaching, and so forth. Often some years later, I might look back at how good I thought I was at a certain skill and think, oh, bless, it was cute. I thought I was that good at, say, writing back then. I might have been better than most, but there's still so much for me to learn. I mean, just to use writing as an illustration, because it's such a good example in my life. When I grew up, I was generally quite good at writing. I had quite a good natural aptitude for it. And so I thought, I'm a good writer. And then I got to university. The first time I remember doing any serious thinking about how to improve as a writer was when I was preparing for my final exams. And I had the opportunity to work with a writing coach. And I thought, I'm quite good at this stuff. But the gentleman in mind really helped me kind of completely transform how I approached my academic writing. It turned out that there was still an awful lot I had to learn about how to write well academically. And I improved dramatically in just a few short sessions with this chap. He really helped me in just a few short sessions. And I took a lot of those skills forward into my professional career, my career before exam study expert in the corporate world. And I remember being regarded as quite a good writer in amongst my colleagues, and they'd often turn to me for writing and proofreading advice and so forth. And then as I became more and more interested in the kind of work I do now, and I've founded Exam Study Expert, and I wanted to write good books and write good podcast episodes and be able to write good website pages and so forth, I kind of quickly realized that my current skill set in writing wasn't kind of getting me what I wanted in terms of being able to do the above types of writing well. So I went and did a whole load of learning about how to do the kind of writing I wanted to be able to do now. And, I improved in another big bound forward. And I'm sure there's still further bounds forward to improve yet more in my writing. I'm getting quite good at it, but I know that there is the best is still to come in terms of my skills as a writer. Every year, I'm reminded that no matter what skill I'm thinking about, I'm not done yet. Improving your skills is a lifelong mission. And just because I can improve at something, again, it doesn't mean I'm broken or deficient or bad at it today. But just because I'm not bad at something doesn't mean there isn't that potential and the benefit from going to good to great, from great to outstanding. So whether we're thinking about our skills at learning, or whatever skill you choose to think about in your life, stay hungry and be humble. And please remind me to do the same when you see me. Wishing you every success in your studies.
Just before you go, did you know you can hire William as your very own coach and mentor to show you the stress-free way to ace your exams by studying smarter, not harder? Find out how at examstudyexpert.com/coaching.